Hello everyone, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, USA. In the last few weeks, I've been reworking my workshop more than working on stuff in the workshop, and I thought that it being the end of the year, it was a good time to show off the changes and do some planning ahead for videos in the upcoming new year. So let's have a look. I'm sure the first thing you've noticed is I'm not sitting at my normal location at the electronics workbench. This is my new retro computer desk where I can keep things set up for a longer period of time. On the electronics workbench, I need to use that for my business, so I had to tear things down at the end of each day, which was kind of inconvenient. You've probably seen this table in some other of my videos. I've just been using it for storage for several months now, and just recently got around to refurbishing it so I could actually use it. I call this a retro computer desk, but in reality it's an old kitchen table that was pretty rickety when I got it. I had to add some 2x2 bracing to the legs, and then I added some braces around the sides in the back to make a nice sturdy workbench. And the brace along the back was convenient because I could mount a power strip there to have a convenient place to plug everything in. Just here you can see some of the bracing I was talking about I needed to do to the table to make it sturdy. Here we have a monitor riser built out of some scrap lumber I had lying around. It was sized to fit this Extron DVS 304A upscaler. This is kind of the big brother to the one I use on the electronics workbench. This also includes audio switching. The nice thing about these Extron units is you can get them fairly cheap on eBay for $30 to $50, and you can feed just about any sort of old format video signal into it and get a really nice VGA signal out. This vintage computer power switch box I found at a thrift store just a few days before Christmas for like $6 or $9. It works great, and so I can, have the power for the monitor, the Extron, the computer, and the printer all connected to it with one master switch and individual switches as well. Got a little cubby over here for power supplies. Right now I just have the C64 power supply connected, but there's room also for a Commodore 128 or Amiga power supply right beside it. Got this Panasonic color dot matrix printer I've been playing with recently. It does great on black and white. The color was another mess, but we'll look at that in a few minutes. Oh, in here we have a homemade IEC hub. In order to hook up the printer at the same time as the SD to IEC, I needed another IEC jack. So I robbed some junk 1541 drives for their connectors, and luckily it lined up on some 10th-inch perf board and just wired everything together, and it doesn't look like a whole lot, but hey, it works. One interesting thing I noticed with the Centronics printer interface I'm using, it taps its power off the cassette port, is it puts out a lot of interference. It's enough to interfere with the video, so I don't keep that plugged in unless I'm going to actually be printing. And I think eventually I'll make a riser that's similar for the other side, that size, so I can slide the A3000 back underneath it, and maybe also have a cubby there for the keyboard so I can tuck it safely out of the way when I'm using this area for something else. We're over at the electronics workbench, which is where I normally make my videos. For a long time I'd been wanting a deeper bench top, but I couldn't find a used bench in my area, and a new one was simply out of my price range. One day I happened to realize that I had a sheet of plywood in my garage that's left over from a project years ago, and while it had a strip cut off one of the long sides, it was still about 36 inches wide and 8 feet long. So I got some banding boards and then finished it with some of that combination stain and polyurethane, and set it down over the existing plastic fold-up table, which is actually quite a heavy-duty table, and it makes a really nice workbench top. From the wall to the edge of the bench now is about 39 inches, which is right at 1 meter. And I appreciate the new work surface. It's nice for those larger objects. It keeps things like the soldering station back out of the way and the cords out of the way. It's worked out quite nice. The combination stain and sealer, well, I'm not so thrilled with that. It's perfectly fine for a project like this, which is more utilitarian. But I think for a fine woodworking project, I would still use a separate stain and sealer. I've had these wire metal shelves up here for many years now. And I like this type of shelving because it's easy to reconfigure, and I've done that a few times as I figured out exactly where I want to position things. The downside with things like the test gear on here is that the feet from the test gear fall through the slots in the wires, and it makes quite a mess. So I'd kind of rigged up some pieces of plywood under the smaller stuff, which worked for a while. And after doing a lot of searching around and considering some clear plastic, acrylic or something like that, a little more light through, I settled on this white coated masonite, which is used for wainscoting a lot of times. And I just got this cut and installed a few days ago, and it's working out quite well. It gave me a chance to kind of rearrange everything and dust everything and rearrange the wires for the monitor, that type of thing, all at the same time. I showed you the Panasonic printer over there that I've been working with for the last several weeks, and when I was doing black and white printing, it was all going along quite well and making really nice printouts. And I decided to put the color ribbon in it, and then it all went sideways. This is the feed roller from the color ribbon, and there's supposed to be 4 little tires on there. And although this was a new old stock ribbon still sealed up in the plastic, this foam rubber turned to glue and stuck to the ribbon, and I had a big wadded up mess of ribbon in here. And I'll cut in some pictures here of what I found when I took it apart. So while I got the ribbon cleaned up probably okay, so it'll work somewhat, I was able to take a knife and scrape the ribbon to get the goo off of it without damaging the ribbon too bad, although there's still some colors smeared together in certain places. I wondered what I was going to get to replace those foam rubber feed rollers. And I first got some neoprene tubing like this, but the size wasn't quite right, and it's actually really difficult to try to cut slices off of it. So that didn't work out too well, but the material, felt about right. It's the similar stickiness, firmness that I would imagine that the original feed roller had. And I found some neoprene foam in a sheet that's about 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch thick. And so I'll go out to the shop and use my little lathe to make a punch, to try to punch some tires out that are the correct size and see if we can't rehabilitate this ribbon. So my suggestion is that if you happen to get a hold of a color printer like this with a color ribbon, even if the ribbon's new, you take it apart and check out that feed roller, because I bet it's turned to goo after all of these years. So we're at the end of 2019 now, and I've been making videos for about 2 years. What I've been wondering about lately, though, is what my contribution to this, retro computing community is. I really enjoy making the videos and sharing the things that I like with other people, but I don't want to be yet another guy doing review videos. While I appreciate review videos and I watch them all the time, there's a lot of people already doing that, so I want to do something different. Looking at the channel analytics, it seems that the most popular types of videos I've done have been the ones that have been a little more in-depth. Things like tearing the Commodore brick power supplies down to the component level and looking at what was inside and what the strengths and weaknesses of the design were. Programming the C64 in Forth, that was a really popular series. The little Pac-Man game programmed in Commodore Basic was fairly popular, as well as a Zoom floppy setup video. One of the things that prompted me to start making videos was watching other folks struggle trying to repair their vintage computers. A lot of times folks don't have a lot of troubleshooting experience, and they're just not sure of what process to follow to determine what the process is and effective repair. And I read the forums and the Facebook groups, and I feel sad for these people that are really trying their hardest to get something fixed, but they're just not sure where to go next or how to look for the problem. So I was thinking maybe a series of videos that concentrates more on the troubleshooting process rather than the end goal of refurbishing a particular machine might be helpful. But what do you think? Let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. What other types of videos would you like to see? Let me know. Another idea that comes to mind is maybe a video or two on how to use tools like the C64 dead test cartridge and diagnostic cartridge. What that's actually telling you and how to interpret the information that it's telling you about the errors or the chips that it thinks are an error, and then how to take that further in the troubleshooting process and determine if you really need to replace that or not. So let me know what you think. What would you like to see in new videos for 2020? Just leave some comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, bye, and have a great new year.